Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Gokula Nanda, Radha Gokula Nanda, Radha Gokula Nanda, Shri Radhe. Jaya Sita Ram Lakshman Hanuman, Jaya Sita Ram Lakshman Hanuman. Jaya Gauranitai, 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 Jaya Gauranitai. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. So today right now we'll be having a class on the Bhagavad Gita. So please feel free to sit in the class and take part in the discussion. Hare Krishna. So today we'll be reading from Bhagavad Gita chapter 4 entitled Transcendental Knowledge, and it's verse 41 and 42. So I'll just read 41 on my own, and then we can repeat 42 together. Yoga sanyasta karmanam jnana sanchina samshayam atmavantam na karmani nibadnanti dhananjaya. Translation: one who acts in devotional service, renouncing the fruits of his actions, and whose doubts have been destroyed by transcendental knowledge, is situated factually in the self. Thus he is not bound by the reactions of work, O conqueror of riches. In purport, one who follows the instruction of the Bhagavad Gita as it is imparted by the Lord, the personality of Godhead himself, becomes free from all doubts by the grace of transcendental knowledge. He, as a part and parcel of the Lord in full Krishna consciousness, is already established in self-knowledge. As such, he is undoubtedly above bondage to action. Now we can repeat 42 together. I'll say it and then you can repeat after me. Tasmad jnana sambhutam Ritstam jnana sinatmanaha Chitvainam samshayam yogam Atishto tishta bharata tasmad jnana sambhutam Hritstam jnana sinatmanaha Chitvainam samshayam yogam Atishto atishta bharata. Would anyone like to say? Ramraj. Tasmad jnana sambhutam Hritstam jnana sinatmanaha Chitvainam samshayo yogam Atishto atishta bharata. Anyone else? Okay. So word to word. Tasmat. Therefore. Ajnana sambhutam. Born of ignorance. Hritstam. Situated in the heart. Jnana. Of knowledge. Asina. By the weapon. Atmanaha. Of the self. Chitva. Cutting off. Enam. This. Samshayam. Doubt. Yogam. In yoga. Atishta. Be situated. Utishta. Stand up to fight. Bharata. O descendant of Bharat. Translation by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. Therefore, the doubts which have arisen in your heart out of ignorance should be slashed by the weapon of knowledge. Armed with yoga, O Bharat, stand and fight. Purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. The yoga system instructed in this chapter is called Sanatana Yoga, or eternal activities performed by the living entity. This yoga has two divisions, or sacrificial actions. One is called sacrifice of one's material possessions, and the other is called knowledge of self, which is pure spiritual activity. If sacrifice of one's material possessions is not dovetailed for spiritual realization, then such sacrifice becomes material. But one who performs such sacrifices with a spiritual objective or in devotional service makes a perfect sacrifice. When we come to spiritual activities, we find that these are also divided into two, namely understanding of one's own self or one's constitutional position, and the truth regarding the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One who follows the path of Bhagavad Gita as it is can very easily understand these two important divisions of spiritual knowledge. For him there is no difficulty in obtaining perfect knowledge of the self as part and parcel of the Lord. And such understanding is beneficial, for such a person can easily understand the transcendental activities of the Lord. In the beginning of this chapter, the transcendental activities of the Lord were discussed by the Supreme Lord Himself. One who does not understand the instructions of the Gita is faithless and is to be considered to be misusing the fragmental independence awarded to him by the Lord. In spite of such instructions, one who does not understand the real nature of the Lord as the eternal, blissful, all-knowing personality of Godhead is certainly fool number one. Ignorance can be removed by gradual acceptance of the principles of Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is awakened by different types of sacrifices to the demigods, sacrifices to Brahman, sacrifice in celibacy, in household life, in controlling the senses, in practicing mystic yoga, in penance, in foregoing material possessions, in studying the Vedas, and in partaking of the social institution called Varnashram Dharma. All of these are known as sacrifice, and all of them are based on regulated action. But within all of these activities, the important factor is self-realization. One who seeks that that objective is the real student of Bhagavad Gita, but one who doubts the authority of Krishna falls back. One is therefore advised to study Bhagavad Gita or any other scripture under a bona fide spiritual master with service and surrender. A bona fide spiritual master is in the disciplic succession from time eternal, and he does not deviate at all from the instructions of the Supreme Lord, as they were imparted millions of years ago to the Sun God, from whom the instructions of Bhagavad Gita have come down to the earthly kingdom. One should therefore follow the path of Bhagavad Gita as it is expressed in the Gita itself, and beware of self-interested people after a personal aggrandizement who deviate others from the actual path. The Lord is definitely the Supreme Person, and his activities are transcendental. One who understands this is a liberated person from the very beginning of his study of Bhagavad Gita. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport to the 4th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita in the matter of transcendental knowledge. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurve Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pasyata Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So I'll just read the translation again. I'll read both. So 41, one who acts in devotional service, renouncing the fruits of his actions, and whose doubts have been destroyed by transcendental knowledge, is situated factually in the self. Thus he is not bound by the reactions of work, O conqueror of riches. Therefore, the doubts which have arisen in your heart out of ignorance should be slashed by the weapon of knowledge. Armed with yoga, O Bharat, stand and fight. So, just hands up, who's familiar with Bhagavad Gita? Familiar, okay. So maybe I can give a quick summary of the previous chapters for others that are not so familiar. So chapter 1, observing the armies on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. We start off with the two armies assembled, Kauravas and Pandavas, and so there's many illustrious and strong fighters on either side. And actually, there's already so many signs indicating that the Pandavas will win this battle. For example, the fact that the battle is being fought on Kurukshetra. Kurukshetra was a dharma kshetra, so it was already considered a holy place. So that goes in favor of the Pandavas, as they were such holy people. There's also the fact that on the flag on Arjun's chariot, there is Hanuman, and Hanuman obviously fought in the battle with Lord Ramachandra, so that is another sign of victory. So, and also the fact that Krishna is on the Pandava side, that's the biggest sign, right? So there's already so many lakshanas, so many signs that the Pandavas will win. And so Dhritarashtra, he's kind of doubting the possibility that his sons will win, the Kauravas will win. So he's asking Sanjay to describe the battlefield, kind of to relieve his own anxieties. And so yes, like this, all the fighters are being described, and Arjun instructs Krishna to take the chariot into the center. And now Arjun is having a crisis. He's overwhelmed with passion. He's overwhelmed with grief because he sees his family members, and he's thinking, if I kill these people, it's not going to be good. He's a lot of family members on the other side, a lot of his teachers. So then he's giving Krishna a lot of reasons why he shouldn't fight. And then he throws down his bow, and he becomes overwhelmed with this grief. And so, but that being said, Arjun's reluctance to fight indicates his kind heart. And a kind heart is the best qualification for someone to receive transcendental knowledge. So then in chapter 2, Krishna, he doesn't at all sympathize with Arjun's reasoning. Actually, he just tells Arjun to do your duty. He says, do your duty and fight, and orders him to overcome his weakness. And then so Arjun is in this dilemma. He's split between this aversion to kill his relatives and his teachers, but then the fact that Krishna wants for him to fight. And then Krishna at this point says, Karpanya doshopahata swabhava prachami tvam dharma sumuda chetaha yat shreyasya nishchitam burhitan me shishyasteham shadimam tvam prapanam. He says, now I'm a disciple unto you. Now that I've lost all composure, I surrender fully unto you. I'm your disciple. So like this, he kind of became, he saw Krishna as his spiritual master. And so then Krishna is now speaking to him and kind of relieving all of his anxieties. He's saying, well, anyways, we're not the body. The soul lives on. He says, Na jayate mriyate va kadachin nayam bhutva bhavitava nabhuyaha ajo nitya shashvato yam purano na hanyate hanyamane sharire. For the soul there's neither birth nor death. So like this, he's kind of relieving these anxieties. We're not the body. You may kill this body, but the soul moves on. And anyways, for a fighter, dying in battle promotes them to a heavenly planets. And so from this chapter we can see that Arjun's desire not to fight is based on his desire to enjoy life and enjoy life with his relatives, even at the cost of doing his duty. So Krishna explains that this kind of mentality will bound someone to the material world. And therefore, Krishna advises Arjun to engage in buddhi yoga, or doing work without attachment of results. And fighting in this way will allow someone to become free of the cycle of birth and death and ultimately go back home, back to the kingdom of God. So then we come to chapter 3 of the Gita, and Arjun is still confused because he thinks buddhi yoga means that one should retire completely from doing the work and just perform penances and austerities. And Krishna is saying, no, it's not that. It's that you fight, but in the mood of renunciation, you offer the results to the Supreme. And that's the best purification, working without attachment. And so Arjun is asking, so then Krishna is explaining here, performing sacrifices for the pleasure of the Lord, pleasure of me, that guarantees material prosperity and freedom from sinful reactions. And so then Arjun poses a question here. He says, what causes one to engage in those sinful reactions anyways? What engages them to have those sinful propensities? And then Krishna explains, this is all induced by lust. He says, lust bewilders one and entangles them in the material world. And there's a verse from the Bible, which I like sometimes, I read. It says, if a man loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of flesh, the lust of life, the lust of eyes, the pride of life is not of the Father, but of this world. The world and its desires pass away, but he who does God's will lives forever. So like this, lust is kind of tethering us to this material world, and it actually presents itself in our senses, in our mind, in our intelligence. And the only way this can be counteracted, Krishna is explaining, is by steadying the mind, by deliberating on spiritual intelligence. So only spiritual strength can conquer lust. And so now we come to the current chapter, chapter 4. Chapter 4 is entitled Transcendental Knowledge, which is Jnana Yoga. And Krishna, first of all, starts the chapter by explaining that he imparted all of this knowledge that he's giving to Arjun, he imparted already to Vivashvan, the sun god. And so, he says, Imam Vishvate Yogam Proktavan Aham Avyayam. Aham, he says, I was the one who instructed this knowledge to the sun god. And then he says, Evam Parampara Praptam Imam Rajasuyo Vidu Sakalena Mahata Yogo Nashta Parantapaha. He says, this knowledge was then from the sun god passed down through disciplic succession, and that's how it got spread. And then he says, the reason I'm now telling you this science is because you're my friend, you're my devotee. He says, Sa evayam mayate dya yogo prakta purat tanaha bhakto si me saka cheti bhakto si me saka bhakto and saka. You need to be a devotee, you need to be a friend of the Lord. So like this, Krishna is establishing three things. Where does knowledge come from? It comes from me. How is it passed down? It's passed down through disciplic succession. And then that third point, what is the qualification for receiving this knowledge? You have to be a devotee of the Lord. You have to be a friend to the Lord. And then Krishna is then saying, and he also says in this chapter, it's a famous verse, Yadahi dahi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyutanam dharmasya tadatmanam shajamyaham. He says, whenever there's a decline in religiousness, then I descend and I come to establish the religious principles. He then says, Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya chaduskritam dharma samstapanataya sambhavami yuge yuge. Millennium after millennium I've come, and I've come to annihilate the miscreants, I've come to deliver the pious, and re-establish the principles of religion, re-establish righteousness. So in this way, this is why Krishna is explaining why he comes down to the material world, is to give this transcendental knowledge. This whole chapter is about transcendental knowledge. And then Krishna goes on in this chapter to clear some of Arjun's philosophical doubts. So one of them in this is that he addresses the misconception that the Vedic scriptures talk of polytheism, that there are many, many different gods, but then Krishna reestablishes the principle of monotheistic stance. He says there's only one God, and he says that yajante iha devata. There's the demigods. He uses the word demigods. That there's demigods, and then there's one true God. So like this, he's defeating all these different philosophical doubts that Arjun might have. And then Krishna is also explaining, ultimately, transcendental knowledge, it will clear your karmic bank account. This is the benefit of practicing jnana yoga. And then, so you might ask, well, okay, this all sounds good, but how do I attain this transcendental knowledge? And then Krishna explains, Tadvidi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattva darshina. That you have to go to a spiritual master and you have to inquire submissively, you have to render service unto them. And then that self-realized soul can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth. So Arjun is going to Krishna and he's inquiring submissively like this. And it's important that we go. So as I said at the start of chapter 4, Krishna explained that he's the source of all knowledge. So when we go to acquire knowledge, we have to then connect to a parampara that connects to the source of knowledge. That's why we follow Prabhupada's teachings, is this parampara leads all the way back to the source, which is Krishna. That's the importance. There's so many different paramparas, so many different lines, but where do they lead? So we have to make sure that it leads to the source of knowledge. He says, Proktavan aham. Krishna, I'm the source. Yes. And then Krishna is explaining that the ignorant and faithless persons, they doubt the revealed scriptures, and therefore they don't attain God consciousness, Krishna consciousness. So now that brings us to today's verse. And Krishna says, where's the verse again? He says, one who acts in devotional service, renouncing the fruits of his actions, and whose doubts have been destroyed by transcendental knowledge, is situated factually in the self. Thus he is not bound by the reactions of work, O conqueror of riches. So Krishna is explaining, by doing devotional service, by renouncing the fruits of actions, and destroying doubts through transcendental knowledge, through jnana yoga, one can be established in self-knowledge, and that he is a part and parcel of the Lord, and that in full Krishna consciousness, and therefore he won't be bound by the reactions of work. And then we come to the concluding verse, the main verse, and Krishna is telling Arjun, fight this ignorance in your heart with the weapon of knowledge. And there's so in this way, Arjun is being commanded by Krishna that you fight this inner war first, and then you address this outer war of this battlefield of Kurukshetra. And many times we see so many people are fighting battles externally, but if they address the internal issues, then they're better off, right? So we have to fight ourselves before we can deal with the challenges of this material world. So therefore, Krishna says, use the weapon of knowledge to slash out any doubts. And there's actually a cool, a nice kind of similarity in the Christian tradition. They say equip me with the shield of faith and the chest plate of righteousness. So it's like, in my head I was thinking, that's all good, like shield of faith, chest plate of righteousness, but we have this, the best form of defense is attack. So we have to cut out these doubts with the weapon of knowledge. And so you might ask, well, what kind of knowledge do we acquire? There's so much out there, so many different scholars, so many different mental speculators that are kind of giving knowledge and from a position of a so-called authoritative position. But so we have to think about what is actually true knowledge that's going to be beneficial to our spiritual lives. And so there's a pastime in the Chaitanya Charitamrita in Adi Leela where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is speaking to Tapan Mishra. And Tapan Mishra is a learned scholar, but despite all of his study, he's confused. So he studies many books, many scriptures, and he's really confused. And so Mahaprabhu says, Bahu Shastre Bahu Vakya Chitta Brahma Hoy Sadhya Sadhana Sheshta Na Hoy Nishchoy. He says, if one becomes a bookworm, reading many books and scriptures and hearing many commentaries and the instructions of many men, this will produce doubt within his heart. When one cannot in this way ascertain the real goal of life. So Mahaprabhu is instructing him, he's saying the goal of life is that don't read many books, don't listen to many speakers, don't listen to commentaries, don't hear commentaries, don't listen to the instructions of men. This will produce doubt. And so this might seem like a contradiction, right? Because we're always told, read books, hear instructions. And actually in our philosophy, there's so many seeming contradictions that we read about. But actually this is a paradoxical statement. For example, someone might say, there's the statement, out of sight, out of mind. And then there's the statement, absence makes the heart grow fonder. Both statements are true. They can exist. They just exist at different times, right? So, Mahaprabhu, is giving a paradoxical statement. He's saying, don't read certain books. He's saying, don't listen to many people. Actually, there's different types of shastra. There's shastra containing mainly gyan, so just knowledge, and then there's Shastra Guya, which is mainly Gyan with hints of bhakti, hints of devotion. Then there's Shastra Guyatara, which emphasizes bhakti with Gyan. And then there's Shastra Guyatamam, which is the most confidential knowledge of pure unalloyed bhakti. So when Mahaprabhu is saying don't read many books or don't listen to many speakers, he means not to read books which are not showing the path of pure bhakti, which are showing the path of devotion. He's saying don't listen to speakers who aren't showing the path of pure bhakti. And so even then, if you read Shastra, even then, when you read Shastra, you still may not be able to ascertain the goal of life, the meaning of life. Like there's so many examples in Bhagavatam where these scholars are reading Bhagavatam, but still they're not changing. And for example, there's the pastime, I've said this pastime so many times, but there's the pastime of Balaram and Romaharshan Sutta. So Balaram actually doesn't take part in this war. He actually goes on a pilgrimage. And on his pilgrimage, he goes to the forest of Naimisharanya. Now, in this forest of Naimisharanya, there are many sages assembled, many exalted Vaishnavas. And in this big assembly of Vaishnavas, there's Shri Shri Radha Gokulananda ki, Shri Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman ki, Shri Shri Gauranitai ki. So, in this big assembly of these sages, there is Roma Harshan Sutta giving class. And so, if Roma Harshan is giving class amongst these big sages, then he must also be very, very exalted. And so, what happens? So Balaram walks into this assembly, and all the sages kind of stand up and pay respects to Balaram. Balaram is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's a person from whom all knowledge and strength comes from. So they all pay respects to him. But the Ramaharshan Sutta is sitting on this Vyasasan, and he's giving class, but doesn't respect Balaram. He doesn't even acknowledge him. And so Balaram just completely flips. He says, Risher Bhagavata Bhutva, Shishyo Dityo Bahunicha, Seti Has Puranani Dharma Shastrani Savarshaha. He says, Risher Bhagavata Bhutva, you're a disciple of Vyasadeva, you're from an exalted lineage. Shishyo Dityo Bahunicha, exalted lineage. Seti Has Puranani Dharma Shastrani Savarshaha. Setihas, you've studied the Itihas. Puranani, you've studied the Puranas. You've practically studied every scripture under the earth. But what is the sum total of all of this study? And then he says, Adantasya Vinitasya Rita Pandita Manina Nagunaya Bhavanti Sma. He says, all of this study, the sum total all of this study led to no mind control, no sense control, and you have no humility whatsoever. You're as good as a stage performer. And so, and then Balaram, as he is, he's a very fiery personality. He picks up a kusha straw, a kusha grass, and just wipes Ramaharshan Sutta out. And so the lesson from that is that we read these shastra, we read these scriptures, but there has to be some character change. There has to be some development. There has to be some change. Prabhupada used to say, this philosophy is so powerful, it can turn crows to swans. So like this, we have to actually, we read, but we read with the thinking that we want to change. So now, so as I said, even if you read Shastra, you might not ascertain the true meaning of life. You might not change your character. So then there's the 3 A's. The 3 A's for reading the best way. So the first A is to read with association. If you don't read in association with devotees, you won't be able to draw out the essence of the teachings, and you won't get the blessings of the devotees. And without the blessings of the devotees, the lessons won't penetrate your heart. So we rely fully on the blessings of the devotees. So when we read in association of devotees, they can kind of inspire us. They can draw out lessons that we may not be able to draw out. Sanatana Goswami used to go to Mahaprabhu's feet and say to him that you've given me so much knowledge, now give me your blessings so that the knowledge can reach my heart. So like this, reading with association, that's the first A. And then there's reading with application. It's all good to read the knowledge, but we have to apply it. So after applying the teachings of the Shastra, then that's when devotional service begins. And life is all about bhakti, right? That's where the real taste is. It's not just in the knowledge, it's in the bhakti, it's in the applying, the pure devotional service. And that's only when we'll taste the nectar. And then there's a third A, reading with amplification. And so reading with amplification, once you read and you gain that knowledge, you then share it. And in that way, the realization will go much deeper as we share. Krishna will also empower us to share, right? He will, and he wants us to become the amplifiers of his teachings. So like this, there's the 3 A's, the association, reading with association, and reading with application, and then reading with amplification. Those are some of the points that I wanted to mention. Maybe we can have some, if there's any questions, comments, criticisms, then we can have a nice discussion. Hare Krishna. Jagannath Sutta Prabhu.
What would you say are the advantages of studying Bhagavad Gita instead of Quran or the Bible? From your own experience.
Right. So I was kind of, I've never read the Quran or Bible. I've just read some verses here and there. There we go. So, yeah, from my understanding, well, Bhagavad Gita is of course the oldest book, as Mataji said. Bhagavad Gita, the reason it appeals to me is that we can see Arjun's in a crisis. He's in so much anxiety, so much grief, and he's on this battlefield. And life is like a battlefield, right? There's so many things going on. Even today, there's so many issues, mental health issues. There's so many wars going on. But here we are in this Kurukshetra battle. Arjun is there, and he's asking all the questions that anyone might have in these kind of situations. So all the questions are already answered in Bhagavad Gita. So when we read, we're naturally acquiring all of the answers. So that's what appeals to me. Maybe some other devotees have some realizations of why Bhagavad Gita appeals to them. Premraj? Yes, Prabhu.
How can I really dissociate devotees when devotees don't turn up to the class?
Yes. I think there's so many different Sangha groups, there's so many different Bhakti Riksha groups, so although they might not attend in person in class, there also many we can give them benefit of doubt that they're living busy lives and might not necessarily be able to attend class. But yeah, we can try and endeavor, reach out to them. There's so many devotees. Yeah, I think like that. I've always.
I've been here for over a month, and today is actually a really good turnout. Most of the time, I'm the only person, and maybe a few people from the public.
Yeah, Bhagavad Gita class is notoriously it has low attendance, but that's just one of the things. But I'm sure we can get association outside of Bhagavad Gita classes, and that's why we have these Bhakti Riksha groups, where we can really churn the nectar. And we also have School of Bhakti, where we have these courses and people really teaching and going into depth about all these different scriptures like this. Yeah. If we have the department called School of Bhakti, so like this. I can maybe show you later on. Yeah. Krishna.
Arjun had this sort of anxiety issues, problems. How come me doing this is the right thing? As a person, all of us, I find, don't we have that same problem? Like, for example, some people say that, how come is it that 10 minutes of chanting, 108 rounds of chanting, how can that make me different? How can that solve my problems and this and that and that? Don't we feel that Arjun had the same issues that all of us sort of have?
Just to clarify your question, you're saying that we also have the same problems that Arjun has, and how is it that chanting is the best solution for these problems? Right. So Arjun was. Right, for sure. So Arjun was actually, he didn't want to fight, but he didn't want to fight because he out of compassion, but that compassion was there because he wanted to enjoy life with his relatives and his family members. So he's on the enjoyer platform right now. And so one of the first things Krishna tells Arjun is that you're not the body, right? We're the soul. And ultimately, the body goes away. So you may kill all of these people, but the soul goes on. So that's the first lesson from Bhagavad Gita, that we're the soul. And as the soul, we want to go back home, back to Godhead. So that's the first thing that's established. And actually, the mind is always trying to degrade the consciousness. They say the mind is faster than the wind, and thoughts are more numerous than blades of grass. So like this, the mind is always trying to degrade our consciousness. So how do we fight the mind? We fight the mind by acquiring knowledge. Like we said here, we fight the mind by slashing it with the weapon of ignorance. And so what is the sorry? Weapon of knowledge? That's good correction. The weapon of knowledge. So like this, you ask, what's the benefit of reading Bhagavad Gita? By reading Bhagavad Gita, we're acquiring knowledge of how to tame this mind. And then by taming this mind, we can then, in our chanting, be more focused. And then the benefit of chanting, you asked? Because you're saying there was some difficulty in 10 minutes. Yeah, there's always going to be difficulty, even for myself. Many devotees will say,
How come it that even you just doing 10 minutes of it can solve all these issues of your life?
yeah, because when we chant, we're connecting, we're trying to connect with Krishna. And we're no longer operating on the material platform. We're trying to operate on a spiritual platform, and that way, that it kind of it sets those traumas, those difficulties apart. We're no longer operating on that platform. So although we have to deal with that, we take those troubles happily, because we're doing that on behalf of our journey towards Krishna, like this. Krishna.
I just wanted to go back to the question that Prabhu here asked about why you prefer Bhagavad Gita to the Quran or Christianity, which is an uncomfortable question.
Yeah.
Because you clearly were uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you said, because you haven't read them. And I think the principle is, if you are a spiritual seeker, is that you read everything.
Right.
And make an informed decision. You read the New Testament and the Old Testament, and you make an informed decision which moves your heart most to allow you to find some kind of inner peace in what you're looking for.
Hmm.
Can I comment?
Yes, bro.
So, the Quran, Christianity, and Judaism is the Abrahamic religions. They do not have God as a person, they have God as an identity. I mean, Christianity comes the closest when Jesus refers to God as the Father, but that's it. You know, God is not a person in these religions, but they are an appropriate level of understanding for people at that level who aren't ready to accept God as a person. So they're good for some people, but if you want to go all the way, you need to go to Christianity. So through studying Christianity, through the Quran or Judaism, you can get to kind of like realization that you have an impersonal understanding of God, but not a personal understanding of God. So the short answer is it's a waste of time.
Yeah. I mean, so the basic principles of Christianity and Islam are there, and so we try and make sure that we're aware of these basic principles. But ultimately, in Krishna consciousness, what I found is that Krishna consciousness is all about connecting with Krishna. Krishna is a person, and it's that much more sweeter that when we're connecting to a person. When there's these vague ideas of God, or someone who sits on a throne, or someone with a beard, it's a bit more harder to connect with that. But we know Krishna, we know that he plays with the flutes, we know that he plays with the gopas, with the cowherd boys, and we know his different pastimes. And so in that way, we can connect to him as a person. We can see where our relationship will lie in this description. Yeah. Any other questions? Pramaraj for.
Thank you for your class. I was just thinking, especially with this point of sort of knowledge and gyan, just knowledge in general that's given, when we come to Krishna consciousness and we start reading these things and we see And naturally, when something makes a significant difference in your life, you're inclined to share it with others to help them see how it can make a difference in their lives. But then very quickly, your inspiration for reading can become to be filled with knowledge, to be, it can become very like pride infused. Like, let me read, let me go through the Gita, so that I have so much knowledge, so that I can kind of share it, so that I can kind of, in one way, flatter my ego. So how do you balance that? Like, keep the inspiration to read up, but at the same time not read for the purpose of flattering your
I think this is a personal challenge I've had, where I've been very motivated to read, and then it's my early days in Krishna consciousness, and then I've come in, and then now because I want to give class, or I want to be seen as someone who has a lot of knowledge. I want to read knowledge, but then because that is a material motivation, that motivation dies out quickly, and then and my reading was really bad for a while. But the one thing that, this is from the 3 A's, the one thing that's really helped me is reading in association. Because that association will also tame you. They will tame you. They'll be able to catch when you're reading for the wrong reasons. When you're reading with seniors, they'll be able to address these issues. Like this. I found that reading with association really helps. Hopefully that answers.
Thank you so much.
Jai. Okay, there'll be Gaur Arti in 10 minutes. So I think we can end here. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki, Srila Prabhupada ki.
Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Juta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavansham Shri Rupam Chakrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tvam Sajivam Shadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sagana Lalita Sri Vishakhanitanstam Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasadi Gaurabhakta-vrinda
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Radha Gokulananda, Radha Gokulananda, Radha Gokulananda, Shri Radhe. Shri Shri Radha Gokulananda ki jai, Shri Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman ki jai, Shri Shri Gauranitai ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Krishna. Giva Jaya Jaya Gaurachande Arati Giva Jaya Jaya Gaurachande Arati Kashopa. Janavita Tavane Jagamanalopa. Shrini Vasachakratara Vasiyache Gauracha Ratna Simhasane